going to start with the equation solving stuff at the bottom of worksheet 1B. And I want you, when you see all these nasty fractions, I want you to get rid of those using the least common denominator. I don't want you doing anything crazy like changing them to decimals or trying to work with the fractions, okay? I want you to be practicing getting rid of the denominators because that's a big thing you do a lot of in further math classes too. So number 16, can anybody tell me what, oh, where are my little colored, oh, there they are, okay. Can anybody tell me what the common denominator would be for 4, 8, 5, and 40? 40. So if we're using proper math, you should write, I'm going to multiply a 40 onto this side, everything on that side, and onto this side, everything. Now, I'm usually lazy and I just write 40 one time and put the entire thing in parentheses. So whatever works for you, but you're multiplying everything there by 40. I don't want to bother to combine these. They're like terms right there, but I'm just going to get rid of those denominators first, okay? Now, grab your calculator, because we know we're not super fraction fun here. We're going to do 40 times 9 divided by 4, okay? 40 times 9/4. And you don't need parentheses. You can just do 40 times 9 divided by 4. Now, if you're on math team, the shortcut would be to say 40 divides by 4 10 times, so then 10 times 9 is 90, okay? Just helping some of you who want to do it mental math. The next one would be 40 times 3 divided by 8. I can read 40 times 3 divided by 8, which would be 15, I think. Anybody get that? And then 40 times 2 divided by 5 back here. Oh, by the way, I think I forgot to mention, you didn't lose the X, did you? Because that's my big mistake. I lose those X's all the time. So then 90 should have an X. All right, back here it was 40 times 2 divided by 5 was 16. And over on this side, negative 179 over 40 times 40, these are just going to divide out and we get negative 179. All right, so collecting like terms here, we end up with 90x plus 1. These are like terms on the same side, so we're just combining them. And this one happens to come out nice because if we subtract 1, we get negative 180. Sounds like a geometry problem with those 90s and 180s, huh? We divide and get negative 2. Anybody having trouble? Please shout if I make a mistake because, yeah, usually I make more mistakes when I'm recording. Is that one dead? Can you set it over on top of those chargers so that I know to worry about it later? Thank you. All right, number 17. I am not going to give you one with numbers this ugly on the test or quiz, and so I'm just going to skip this one because it's just plain ugly, okay? You would have to distribute before you bothered to use the least common denominator. But I think, isn't 19 like that? Does 19 have parentheses in it? Yeah. So we'll do 19 instead. This one just had huge icky numbers and I'm voting we skip it. All right, let's do 18 real fast. What would the common denominator be here? 14. Here's my lazy way of doing that. I'm just going to put a 14 and a parenthesis around the whole thing. We're on finishing worksheet 1, side B, okay? 14 times 3 divided by 2, 21, anybody? Okay. And then 14 times 12 divided by 7. If you're into the mental math, you could do 14 divided by 7 first is 2, and then times 12 is 24. Okay. Over, and don't lose your X over on the first one. Oh, I'm struggling here. Okay. Then 14 times a negative X on this side would be a negative 14X. Don't forget you got to do that one too by 14. And the last one, I'm going to say 14 times 47 divided by 2, maybe 94. How did I do? Okay. Now, when you get to this point, you're kind of on your own. You can move any one of those 4 numbers, right? It's up to you the order you do this in. I usually would combine or get all my X's on one side first. And Then my constants on the other side. Now, I'm trying to show every step today. Because it's pre-calc, I am warning you eventually I'll skip some steps, especially like that very bottom one there, and just write x equals 2. And I'm fine if you do that. As long as I can follow your... Don't skip too many steps on a quiz. Because remember, if I can't tell what you did, it's going to be a concept error. So, anybody got a question? All right, 19. This is the one, when you have parentheses, before you worry about the common denominator, you need to do the distributing. Real quick, if we had this problem, you would just multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom. Everybody with me? So that's kind of the idea we're going to do here. We're going to put this 2 over 1, and then we're going to distribute to both of those, and then we'll worry about our common denominator. So negative 11/4 plus, let's see, 31 times 2 would be 62. 8 times 1 in the denominator would be 8. Now that does reduce, but I don't think it's going to matter, so I'm just going to leave it. 31 times 2 back here would be 62, but the denominator is 8 times 3 or 24. Also reduces, but I don't think it's going to matter. And then I copy the rest of the problem down. All right, common denominator? 24. Can you guys try that on your own? See how far you can get? Multiply by 24 everywhere. And don't lose your x's. That's my big thing. Oh, that one doesn't have an x. See, now I'm going to add an x where there's not one. Yeah, that's not right. Somebody's going to have to help me with this last one. And then my mental math is not working. Did anybody get to the last one? 82 times 8 would be... It is? Okay. You're okay. You got some of them right. That's where I was at. I was like, I need to write this down. Okay, now let's see. Over here, I'm going to combine these and get negative 128. Right, because negative 66 minus 62 more. I think I got that right. Let's see. I think I'll get rid of this first this time. Again, just do the order that you want to do it in. Whoops, I lost 42x. And we'll see if we come up with the same answer at the end. Yep, grabbing my calculator. Negative 656 plus. I think kind of whatever order you messed around in there, did you end up with a 528 and a 144? So then if we divide, I don't know if it comes out nice. If it doesn't, we need to do the good old math, enter. Okay. And I would accept that answer. I think it says on the quiz to use improper. So if we did, I can do it on here so that you can see, but, oh. What was it? Negative 528 divided by 144. Did I remember the numbers right or not? Okay. And And then you can do math, enter, to change it to an improper fraction, which is what I will ask you to have on the quiz. Negative 11 thirds. Now, who's got a question? Because you were, this 62 was negative, is that where, and this, you good? Because those are both on the same sign, so I got negative 128, because I combined them. All right? Anybody else? Yep, easy to do. And if you did everything right from there on down, that would just be like a math error, okay? Which makes grading really fun for me because it means I have to check what you did from there on. Is that right? Was it negative 11 thirds? Okay. Totally lost my train of thought. Any questions? Anybody else got something different and they're stuck somewhere? All right, is that whole page? Are we done? Okay, we're gonna go to the next page. The learning targets for today are to be able to know the 3 different forms of the lines, okay? And write an equation given a point and a line that's either parallel or perpendicular. We're gonna talk about parallel and perpendicular slopes, sorry. Write an equation of a line through 2 points, and then write that equation in slope, intercept, point slope, or standard form. This last one we're doing tomorrow, okay? It starts off with just discussing what a linear equation is versus other kinds of equations. If I had mixed those all up, would you be able to pick out the ones that were lines? Okay, anything that can be written in this form or this form. And the reason we have to include this one is like if you wrote 1x plus 0y equals 6, that would qualify as standard form. All of these are lines though, are we agreeable? And things with a square root, that's not a line. Squared is a parabola, absolute value is like a v. We're good? Those are not lines. All right, quick. What are some things we learned about slope yesterday? Now, if I asked you what slope is on a test or quiz, I would not expect you to write this because this is equation of a line, right? You could tell me that that is slope, but that's not really what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for things like y2 minus y1 we learned yesterday. Or you could write that as change in y over change in x. For just the definition of slope, you could tell me rise over run. Or change vertically over change horizontally. You don't have to write all those down. Everybody's good with slope, one of those definitions. This is the one we're going to need to use a lot today when we're finding equation between two, or slope between 2 points. We good? You good, Justin? Okay. I just don't want to rush you if you need more time. Okay. We're good with this. Y equals mx plus b. We practiced graphing yesterday. This is our favorite form, right? Point slope is super important that you become familiar and comfortable with for calculus. Now, given 2 points to find an equation between, a lot of you did not use point slope in other courses. I hope some of you, it looks familiar, but you're going to need to memorize and become familiar with this form. It is, guess what, easiest to use when you know a point and a slope. That's why it gets the name. Then standard form is a somewhat useless form that some mathematician decided was really cool because you can't have fractions. Everybody's good that integers are not fractions, okay? And a has to be greater than 0, which means you have to start out with a positive number. So if I ended up with this equation after I moved things around, what would I have to do? That would get us to this form, y equals form. To have proper standard form, you have to have x and y on the same side and the constant on the other side. The issue is that a has to be greater than 0. So you would have to change the sign, like multiply everything by -1, divide by -1, just change the signs. Everybody with me? Yeah. So we would end up with 2x minus y equals -7. Someone decided that was prettier, to always have the first one be positive. I have no idea why. I kind of agree with them that if you have this, it might be prettier to get rid of the fractions. What would we do there? Multiply by 2, so we'd end up with 1x plus 2y equals -8. Okay, now, why is this a prettier form? Well, it's only a prettier form if you want to find the intercepts, but it is a form that they use a lot on standardized testing. Now, if I asked you to graph that, very few of you would put in the zeros like I did yesterday. You'd probably solve for y, right? But that is called standard form, and you need to know how to use it for the quiz. We'll practice. Ready? Super easy. Can you have this one done already? You shouldn't even need me. -5 down here, up 2 and over 1. So I'm just going to sketch something ridiculously off. The slope was 2 over 1 or 2. Okay, the y-intercept was down at over 0 and down 5. All right. We're going to find the x-intercept. Does anybody remember how you find the x-intercept? Anytime you need a y-intercept, okay, you set x equal to 0. Anytime you need an x-intercept, you set, what do you think? Y equal to 0. This is true for the rest of pre-calculus, guys. When we're doing, 7x to the 4th minus 3x to the 3rd plus 2x minus 8, find the x-intercept, find the y-intercept. That's what you do. You want an x-intercept, you set y equal to 0. You want a y-intercept, you set x equal to 0. All right, so if we put in a 0 for the y, this equation would become, and I would add 5 over here, divide by 2, and I'm going to write it as 5/2. If we're graphing it, we could label it up here as 2.5. I went really fast, but you follow it? Tyler, were they able to switch, or you don't know yet? Okay, I really wish you would take the notes, because there's not a lot of space in electives, so they may tell you you can't move and you're stuck with me. Not that you want to be stuck with me, I get it, but all right. Most of the time, if you asked me to graph or find an x-intercept or a y-intercept for this form, I would mess with the form. This is not a pretty form. There's one thing you might recognize from this form. It was y minus y1. You don't have to write this down. It's already on your paper, but that was the form up above, right? So the slope is here. So the slope is 1/2. But most of us would have done what? Distributed. Oops. Yes. What's half of x plus 2? Well, I would have just said half of x, but half of 2 is what? 1. Add 1 over here. I would have changed it to slope-intercept form because that's my favorite when graphing, right? So it starts up here at 2, and it goes up 1 and over 2, up 1 and over 2, blah, blah, blah. So the y-intercept was over 0 and up 2. How do we find the x-intercept again? We put y equals 0 in. And we could have done that anywhere along the way. If we did it down here, we'd have now someone's going to say that's -1. Is that -1? It's saying half of something is -2. So half of what? Yeah. You can use a reciprocal, or could we just use the common denominator like we were doing a minute ago? We could just multiply through by 2 and we'd have -4 equals 1x. So it is at -4, 0, and my graph is really off. That's supposed to be -4 over there. How we doing? Nobody's crying yet? Nope, crying in pre-calc. All right, this is an ugly form. You can solve for the y if you want, but it's actually the one we did yesterday where we very quickly were able to find both the x and the y intercepts by putting in what? 0 for x and 0 for y. Do you remember doing this yesterday or watching me do it? If I put in a 0 for x, it'll say 2 times 0 minus 3y equals 12. Whoops. Which would just be -3y equals 12, which would become what? -4. So that's 0, -4, which is across 0 down 4. So that is actually the y-intercept. To find the x-intercept, I'm going to put the 0 in for y back in that original equation. But does everybody understand that 3 times 0 is 0 and 2x minus 0 equals 12 is just 2x equals 12, right? So we get x equals 6. So when we put in a 0 for the y, we got a 6 for the x. Now, you could still solve for y to find the slope, but can you tell me the slope right now just by looking at the graph? Whoa, bad line. It went up 4 and right 6, didn't it, to get from one of those points to the other? Up 4 and right 6 makes the slope 2/3. I'll write this down over here, but if you don't want to take time to copy it down, you don't have to. You would subtract 2x. I know there's not a lot of room, I don't think, for writing all these, are there? Some years I think this is more review than others. I feel like this year nothing feels like review. Would be in. So now are we good? The -4 and the 2/3 make sense when I solve for y? That was real scribbledy. Is everybody okay? All right, one more question on this page. Does it still talk about parallel or perpendicular, vertical and horizontal? Those are the words I'm looking for. Okay, vertical lines. They go this way. So they cross the x-axis. So they are x equals some constant. That's the kind of equation they are, and they have undefined slope, if we needed to know that. Horizontal lines go this way, and they are in the form y equals some constant number. Can I use that for the number symbol, or do y'all think of that as a hashtag? Can I pretend it says y equals a number? And the slope would be 0 for those. All right, so if I have over here on this tiny little graph 2, -4, and I plot that point, can anybody tell me the equation of the horizontal line that goes through that point? Right up here it says y equals a number. Well, what is the number at that point that y equals? -4. Making sense? If it goes through 2, -4, the y had to be -4. So what do you think the equation of the vertical line is? Yeah, I totally missed that. But it would be x equals 2. Not asking you that on the quiz, but good to go over. All right, what time are we out of here? Because we got a lot more to do still. 24? Ew, I was going to give you a candy break, but can we just wait till the end? You can get it on the way out? because we need to talk about parallel and perpendicular lines. Do you need to stand up for 10 seconds and stretch break? Everybody okay? All right. If two lines are what? Their slopes are equal. If two lines have exactly the same tilt, they are parallel. Okay, if two lines are perpendicular, the symbol for perpendicular is this. So when we see it in a minute, we'll know. Symbol for parallel is like little L's. Okay. If two lines are perpendicular, then their slopes are, okay. If I have one line, say through the origin, that goes up 1 and over 2, to make a perpendicular to that, anybody know what it would be? Yes, down 2 and over 1 would work. Okay, I didn't do that to a very good scale. Does that look like a right angle? Not really. Okay, so the idea is, what do you do to the slope? You remember? Opposite sign and good job, reciprocal, which some teachers call refliprical. Anybody have a teacher called that? You don't have to write that down, but if it helps you remember what a reciprocal is, it's you flip it over. Opposite means one has to be positive and one has to be negative, okay? Unless they happen to be horizontal and vertical lines, and I'm not going to put that on the quiz. All right, so moving right along, what is the slope of this line right here? The slope is currently 1/4. A perpendicular line would therefore have a slope of, yes, -4 over 1 or just -4. Okay, perpendicular, you have to flip it over and change the sign. Everybody good? Parallel, it should make sense to you in your head that if they're going to be parallel, they're going to do exactly the same thing, right? So it would stay 1/4. All right. I don't want to freak anybody out, but I'm going to go kind of fast through this because we covered this yesterday. If you were doing this question and it's on the quiz, you would first find the slope here. So change in y over change in x, which would be 3/5 if I did it right. Then on this one over here, GH, you would do the slope again, -1 minus -6 over 11 minus 8. If I gave you a little more time, could you have found those slopes okay? Okay, so EF was 3/5 and GH is 5/3. Parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Why are they neither? Because it flipped over, but they are the same sign. If I were to graph them on here, one went up 3 and over 5, and the other one up 5 and over 3. Are those two lines parallel or perpendicular? Not at all. Okay, so this is neither parallel or perpendicular. On the quiz, it asks why, and you would say they are not equal or opposite reciprocals. Any questions? When did you learn about that slope business? In both Algebra 1 and Geometry, maybe? About flipping the slope over, changing the sign, parallel, perpendicular? Does that sound right? Did you do any of it in Algebra 2? Maybe? Okay. So I hope you've seen it at least 2 times, maybe 3. Okay. We're going to go real fast for all 3 points, all 3 forms of the equation described here. What did they give us? A slope and a point. Guess what we're going to start with? Point slope. This is the one I really want you to practice. I'm going to write the form here for you. Okay. Now, up here we have a slope, which is m, and an x1 and a y1 from those points. Be really careful. Y minus the y from that point was -4. So minus a -4 is going to become +4. And I don't care if you just write y plus 4. I'm just making it so you know where that came from. The m was 1/3, right? And then it says x minus the x from the point, which was a 3. If I told you to leave an answer in point slope form, you're done. If I told you to leave an answer in slope intercept, now you have to get the y by itself. Can you try that? We have y plus 4 equals, if we distribute, we end up with 1/3 x. What's 1/3 times 3? Just 1, and there's a minus in there. And then we need the y by itself. I got 1/3 x minus 5. Did anybody else get that? Okay. Gotta watch your signs. Remember, you'll have a calculator. Use your calculator all the time if you're troubled with signs. All right, standard form. Anybody remember the rules for that one? Yes. And x and y have to be on the same side. So I'm going to subtract this over to the other side. And remember, you are subtracting it. Let's see, I'll write it down here. -1/3 x, -1/3 x. So I end up with a -1/3 x plus a y. And on the other side, I have a -5 still. Does that work? Are we done? No. Stupid mathematician rule person who made this up. We can't have a negative and we can't have a fraction. What would multiplying through give me to get rid of the fraction? A 3. We need to multiply through by a 3 to get rid of the fractions. But guess what? Can we cheat? If we multiply through by a -3, we'll get rid of the negative out front at the same time. Now, it's okay if you do it in 2 steps. I don't care. -3 times -1/3. You can type it on your calculator, but should come up +1x, or just x is fine. And then we're going to distribute the -3 back here. We're going to get -3y. So you could just write -3y. And then don't forget to go all the way back here, and we get a +15. So x minus 3y equals 15. Do you see where somebody could say, oh, that's so much prettier than those other ones that had fractions? Okay. I think it maybe has to do with back in the good old days when we were typing things, like on a real typewriter. Fractions were a problem. I don't know why they have that form. All right, we're going to try this guy. Equation between 2 points. What do you think we have to do first? Find the slope. So I'm going to write up here just to help you. x1, y1, x2, x2, y2. So I would have what first? Anybody? Is it -6? I can't even read it. -6 minus 9 over, remember you do the y's on the top, -4 minus 2, which is, I think, -15 over -6. If you do a math enter, those both reduce by 3 to 5 halves. Anybody get 5 halves? I can do it on the calculator. -15 divided by -6. Oh, math enter. I typed it wrong even. Forgot to turn my calculator on. Something. It's always something with me. I got 5 halves. Okay, we're good. Slope is 5 halves. Now, this is where some of you would now... Do I have time to talk about this? Do we have 24? Okay. I'm going to put this in the video, but I do not... This is the way Delta Math solves these questions too, by the way. They don't have you use point slope form. Did some of you learn to do it this way? You went y equals mx plus b. And then you put in an x and a y from here. So you'd have 9 equals, if you did 5 halves times 2, you'd have 5. So you're going to get 4. Okay. That's not really the way I want you to do, because this is what you need for calculus. So this is where we're going to try. We're going to start here. The slope is 5 halves. So it's y minus some number equals 5/2 x minus some number. Now, that's supposed to be a 2, sorry. Now, it still doesn't look like a 2. We got to put a point in. Guess what? You can put either one in. Which one? I'm going to use 2, 9, I think, because I don't like those negatives. Is that okay with everybody? Where does the 2 go, though? Yeah, it's the x, and the 9 is the y. So I chose this point out of the 2. You can use either one. And once you simplify, it would become the same equation no matter which point you used. I'm going to go ahead and distribute 5/2 x minus, now we're done for point slope. I'm going on to slope intercept. If I do 5 divided by 2 times 2, I'm going to get 5. What do I need to do to finish? Add 9 over there, which is 5/2 x plus 4. Remember, I got this b equals 4 down here, doing it the other way. Okay, I'd rather you do it the way I did. Standard form, I'm going to go fast because it's ugly. I'm going to move it over to the other side. It will now be negative. And then I'm going to multiply, let's see, by a -2. And it will become 5x minus 2y equals -8. Anything can be negative except what's on the x. Did I do that right? I think so. Anybody doubting me? How could I double check? Anybody know? Could I put 2 and 9 in there and see if it works? 5 times 2 is 10, minus 18 is -8. Works. I could put in the -4, -6, and I'd have -20 plus 12. No, I'd have, yeah, -20 plus 12 is -8. They both work, okay? Both points have to work in there. Okay, I did not get very far. Well, I said I was going to skip this one. I was going to do 10, and I think that was the last one I was going to do anyway. Well, I'll do 10 super fast. You would do y minus 5 equals x plus 2 back here because it's minus a -2, okay? What is the slope, though, if it's perpendicular to this? The perpendicular slope would be -1/3. Okay? Since I'm recording, I'm going to go ahead and finish this, but if you guys need to be done, it's okay. If I distribute, I get that. I'm going to multiply everything through by a 3 because the directions say I got to get to standard form. So then I'm going to add an x over here. And I think while I'm at it, I'll add a 15 over here at the same time. So that's what I got for standard form. Okay. Good news. Delta math mostly requires slope-intercept form, okay? Now, you can start, if they give you a point and a slope or a point and equation line perpendicular, you can start with point slope. Please start with point slope. That's not the way their example is going to show, but it's up to you. I want you to practice point slope because point slope is on the quiz. And then you just solve for y to get slope intercept. And that's what they want their answers in delta math. Okay, so I want you to try the delta math tonight. But if you have questions or you need me to do examples tomorrow or you can't finish it because you fall asleep, because I don't know about you, but I'm going home these days. And I am